Snow hammered the little cabin like it had a grudge, rattling the shutters until they threatened to tear loose. I had just come in from hauling in wood, my beard crusted with frost, and all I wanted was a fire, a stale ration, and a quiet night of not freezing to death. Instead, I opened the door and nearly tripped over a massive, fur-draped figure collapsed on my floor. She was shivering so hard the planks rattled, her voice broken but determined. "Let me serve you. I can cook. I can bear your children, only don't reject me." I blinked at her, half wondering if hypothermia had made me hallucinate. The figure was no ordinary woman. 7 feet if she stood, limbs corded with strength, skin faintly silvered like moonlit ice. Some kind of noble crest still clung to the torn fabric of her clothes, though it was smeared with frost and mud. She looked like a queen dragged through a storm and dumped at my doorstep. And her first words? Offers of food, warmth, and children. Great. Either she was insane, or the cold had scrambled my ears. "Lady, if this is your version of a pickup line, you might want to work on the delivery," I muttered, pulling her inside before the wind slammed the door shut again. She sagged toward the fire as though every ounce of pride had burned out of her. "I mean, sure, I could use someone to cook. But children? You really think that's my biggest problem when I'm rationing powdered soup?" Her eyes snapped open, a deep amber glow sparking despite the cold. "In my house, in my world, a woman without service is nothing. A woman without children is ash. If you cast me out, I am dead already." I rubbed my temples. "So you break into a stranger's cabin and offer domestic labor and, let's call it aggressive family planning? You know, where I come from, the usual opener is hello. Maybe if you're feeling bold, got any food?" She tried to straighten, shivering still. "I am not asking. I am declaring terms. You give me shelter, I give you myself. Meals, strength, and heirs." My laugh came out harsher than I intended. "Heirs? Lady, my legacy is an overdue heating bill and a talent for burning toast. If you're trying to sweet-talk me, you've really misread the market." But she wasn't joking. That much was obvious. Her hands trembled not just from cold but from the weight of pride pressed down by desperation. Whatever high tower she'd fallen from, she had landed here, in my drafty little cabin, bargaining survival with a human mercenary who barely knew how to keep his own socks dry. I sighed and shoved a blanket around her shoulders. "Fine. You can stay. On one condition, if you actually can cook, I'm putting you in charge of the stove. Last time I tried to scramble eggs, they came out looking like alien parasites." Her head tilted, confusion flickering. "Scramble eggs? Oh no." She said it like it was a battle strategy, not breakfast. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Forget it. We'll work on vocabulary later. First, thaw out before you keel over on my rug. I can't explain to the neighbors why a 7-foot noblewoman froze to death in my living room while propositioning me with heirs." She huddled closer to the fire, lips quirking almost imperceptibly. Maybe she found my sarcasm amusing, or maybe she was plotting to kill me in my sleep. Hard to tell. Either way, she stopped shivering long enough to breathe evenly. As I poured 2 mugs of something vaguely resembling tea, I caught her watching me, still solemn. "You mock me," she said. "Yet you did not cast me back into the storm. Your kind is weak. Small. Yet you warmed me." I handed her the mug. "Yeah, well, humanity specializes in questionable decisions. Like letting complete strangers who promise babies crash on the couch. Drink that before you freeze solid." She sipped, grimaced, and coughed. "This is poison." "Nope. That's instant tea. Same thing, though, really." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then softer. "If you accept me, I will not leave. I will not betray. I will serve, and yes, bear your children." I held up a hand. "Okay, ground rules. First, stop bringing up children like it's an item on a grocery list. Second, if you're really staying, you do chores. Real chores. Cooking, laundry, maybe chopping wood, because you look like you could snap logs in half without trying. She studied me, and for the first time, I saw her pride waver into something else, a glimmer of amusement. You dare order me? I dare, I said flatly. Because if you're staying here, you're not some servant or breeding contract. You're my roommate. Equal. Which means, yes, you're on dish duty. Her chest rose as though she couldn't believe it, then she actually laughed, a deep, warm sound that filled the tiny cabin more than the fire ever could. For all her desperation, for all her talk of airs and service, maybe that laugh was the first true bargain struck between us. And if the storm outside kept raging, well, I figured the real chaos was only just beginning. By morning, the storm still howled, but the inside of the cabin was alive with new chaos. She had decided to repay me instantly, insisting that service was the foundation of any bond. I'd been foolish enough to mutter something about breakfast, and the next thing I knew, my kitchen had turned into a war zone. She held 3 eggs like they were weapons of mass destruction, glaring at them as though they'd insulted her ancestors. When I told her to scramble them, she actually squared her shoulders like a soldier going into battle. The sound of shells cracking was followed by a triumphant shout, then a mess of goo splattered across the counter, walls, and part of my sleeve. That is how you defeat them? She asked, proud of herself, hands dripping yolk. I closed my eyes. No, that's how you ruin both breakfast and laundry in one move. Laundry, of course, became the next disaster. She insisted on helping with clothes, though her idea of cleaning was dumping them into a pot of boiling water, then stabbing them with a knife to purge impurities. I watched my socks bubble like stew while she muttered ritual chants. When I pulled them out, they were half-shrunk and smelled faintly of smoke. Congratulations, I said, holding up the tiny rags. You've invented doll clothes. She didn't even flinch. Better for small human children, yes? I nearly choked. Stop circling back to children like you're advertising a deal. Nobody's ordering offspring in bulk here. But she kept weaving it into every conversation. When she offered to chop wood, she bragged that her strength was perfect for raising strong heirs. When she asked about cleaning, she suggested it would make her a fit mother for my future line. Every task turned into some half-comic, half-embarrassing declaration of fertility and loyalty. I couldn't tell if she was trying to seduce me or if her culture had genuinely convinced her that chores and childbirth were interchangeable currencies. Still, watching her misinterpret everything was its own kind of entertainment. She bowed in front of the fridge, assuming it was a food shrine. She waved her hands in dramatic gestures before opening it, then gasped at the frozen dinners inside. This box of cold relics feeds you for seasons? Humans wield impossible magic. I leaned against the counter. That's a microwave lasagna, not divine power. She scowled. Lasagna is a god. I gave up correcting her. And yet, through the comedy, there was something oddly grounding about it. I'd been living alone long enough to forget how ridiculous my habits might look to an outsider. To her, my clumsy attempts at cooking, my obsession with socks, even my battered stove were rituals of survival that deserved reverence. I mocked her for thinking eggs were enemies, but she mocked me right back for burning water when I tried to boil it. She laughed, genuinely, when I set off the smoke alarm, her amber eyes bright with amusement. The more we bantered, the more the double meanings piled up. When she told me she wanted to warm my bed, she was dead serious about heat conservation. I, of course, heard the innuendo first, then panicked trying to explain. It means literally warming the bed, she said, staring at me. What else could it mean? I waved my hands. Nothing. Never mind. Don't worry about it. Her smirk told me she had guessed the other meaning anyway. By midday, the cabin looked like a hurricane had hit it. Broken eggs, damp laundry, a fridge now being treated like a holy altar. And yet, through all the mess, she refused to give up. I will serve. I will prove myself. Her voice was fierce, as if chores were a battlefield and failure meant exile. I tossed her the dish rag. Fine. If you want to prove yourself, start here. Dishes. They're your new trial by fire. She accepted it with reverence, like I had handed her a sacred weapon. And when she plunged her hands into soapy water for the first time, she hissed as if it burned, but kept going anyway. Stubborn to the last. Watching her, I realized this wasn't just desperation or tradition, it was pride. She had been raised to believe her worth was measured in what she could give, and now she was throwing everything into proving it. The comedy of her failures didn't erase the seriousness in her eyes when she said, "Do not reject me." And even as I cracked jokes, I felt something shift. She was making a fool of herself in my kitchen, yes. But she was also breaking down walls I hadn't noticed I'd built. By the time she finally managed to clean a single plate without breaking it, she held it up like a victory trophy. "See? I am useful." I shook my head, laughing despite myself. "Yeah, congratulations. You passed level 1 of dishwashing." Her lips curved in the faintest of grins, and for a second, I thought she looked warmer than the fire. And that was when I realized, the storm outside might last weeks, but the real storm was the one sitting in my kitchen, declaring every chore a matter of life, death, and future children. And somehow, I wasn't sure I minded. By the second night, the jokes weren't enough to cover the cracks. She finally told me why she'd ended up half dead in a snowstorm at my door. Her family had stripped her of title and station, accused her of being unfit to rule, and banished her. No court, no allies, just the cold. Her people didn't exile for mercy, they exiled to erase. She had only one way to survive: prove her worth to someone, anyone, even a human she barely understood. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Rejection is worse than death. If you turn me away, I vanish from history. That is why I offer everything." For once, I didn't have a sarcastic comeback. I just stared into my mug, realizing the bold, ridiculous woman wrecking my kitchen was someone who had lost everything. And suddenly, her constant talk of service, children, loyalty, it wasn't seduction. It was desperation, wrapped in pride. But that didn't mean I was about to let her dictate the rules. "If you're staying," I told her, "you're not some servant. You're not my property. You're my equal." Her brows shot up. "Equal? Humans are smaller. Weaker. If you say equal, then you demand I prove my strength against you?" I should have known better than to argue with a warrior breed. One second she was standing across the room, the next she'd pounced, tackling me onto the cot. For someone half frozen a day ago, she had the force of a freight train. I grunted, trying to push her off. She mistook the effort for a challenge, eyes blazing as she pinned me down. "You dare wrestle me?" she said, half growl, half laugh. I wheezed. "I dared to breathe and you decided that was wrestling." The cot creaked dangerously under her weight, and when she shifted to hold me in place, the entire frame snapped, dumping us both onto the floor. She blinked at the wreckage, then at me, then burst into unrestrained laughter. For the first time since she arrived, she wasn't grim or desperate, she was actually laughing like a person. When we scrambled up, she wasn't finished proving herself. She stormed outside into the storm, declaring she would supply fuel for the hearth. I followed, yelling that she didn't even know how to use an axe. She ignored me, grabbed the tool in one massive hand, and with a single swing, reduced the entire woodpile and the shed around it into splinters. I stared at the mountain of broken timber. "That was 3 winters' worth of firewood. Do you know how long it takes to cut evenly?" She just folded her arms, smug. "You asked for fuel? I gave you abundance." I dragged my hands down my face. "You also gave me a demolition bill." But I couldn't deny it. There was a strange admiration growing in me. She might misunderstand every human custom, but her determination was raw, almost intoxicating. She didn't want to be pitted. She wanted to fight for her place, even if her way of showing it made me want to scream. Later, as we patched the hole in the wall where the shed used to be, she finally asked, softer this time, "Why do you not take me as others would? I offer everything." I lowered myself. "And still you demand I stand as equal. Why?" I met her gaze, tired but steady. "Because if I just take what you're offering, I'd be no better than the people who cast you out. You don't need to prove your worth by serving. You already proved it by surviving. Her eyes narrowed like she was processing that alien concept, that worth didn't come from obedience or children or chores, but from simply existing and refusing to break. And then, slowly, her lips curled. Only a human would speak so foolishly, and only a fool would make me laugh while I am disgraced. She leaned closer, a glint in her amber eyes. Perhaps equality means we share more than chores. Perhaps we wrestle again. Perhaps we test how well humans endure in other trials. The innuendo was clear enough to light the room without the fire. My heart thudded, but I forced myself to smirk. If equality means splitting dishes, chopping wood, and nearly breaking my bed, I don't want to know what your idea of trial number 4 is. Her laugh rumbled low, not mocking this time, but warm, dangerous, promising. And I realized then that the storm outside wasn't half as wild as the one I'd just invited into my life. The storm had eased into a steady hiss against the windows, but the real weight sat in the silence between us. She stood by the fire, tall and proud again, though the blanket still draped around her shoulders betrayed how close she had come to breaking. Her voice cut through the quiet, low but fierce. I will not leave unless you cast me out. I can serve you, warm your hearth, bear your children. Only, do not reject me. It should have sounded absurd, the way she kept repeating that refrain like a vow. But there was no humor in her eyes now, no comic misunderstanding of chores or food shrines. She meant every word, as if my answer would decide whether she continued to exist at all. And in that moment, I realized the joke was gone. This was the heart of it. Her begging was the only armor she had left. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You're not listening. I don't need a servant. I don't need someone to bear my children. I need you to stop measuring yourself by what you can give away. Her brows furrowed, frustration flashing. But that is all I know. To serve, to give, to obey. Without that, I am nothing. I shook my head. No. You're something because you're alive, because you fought through a storm, because you're stubborn enough to turn my entire kitchen into a disaster zone just to prove you belong here. You're not nothing. You're equal to me. That's the only condition. For a long moment she just stared, as if the concept itself was foreign. Then, slowly, her lips curved, not into the proud smirk she used before but into something softer, more dangerous. Equal. Then we share everything. Food, chores, warmth. I swallowed, her meaning ringing clear. The double edge in her words was unmistakable, but it wasn't just innuendo this time. It was an invitation, a dare. She stepped closer, and even the fire seemed to shrink from her presence. In my world, equality is scandal. It is seduction. It is power shared. Do you understand what you claim? I forced a smile, though my chest was tight. If equality means laughing at my cooking and breaking my bed, then yeah, I understand. Her laugh rolled out, low and rich, and the sound filled the cabin. She sat beside me, closer than before, her warmth brushing mine. Humans, she whispered. Fragile, foolish, yet only you warmed me when all others turned cold. Perhaps I chose rightly when I crept into your home. I met her gaze, and for once there was no sarcasm left in me. You didn't just creep into my home. You stormed into my life. And somehow, I think I'm fine with that. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the crackle of the fire and the heat of her presence. Then she exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders as though my words had lifted a burden she'd carried alone too long. You accept me, then? She asked, softer now. On one condition, I said. Not as my servant, not as my property. As my partner. My equal. Her amber eyes gleamed, and she leaned close enough that her breath brushed my ear. Then tonight, partner, we share the bed. For warmth, of course. The words dripped with double meaning, and she knew it. My face burned, but I refused to flinch. Fine. But you're still doing the dishes tomorrow. She laughed again, a sound richer than any fire, and for the first time, her laughter didn't feel like mockery. It felt like home. Outside, the snow piled higher, sealing the world in silence. Inside, two people who never should have met sat side by side, storm survivors in every sense. She had offered herself in desperation, and I had answered with something her people never gave her: acceptance without chains. And though I couldn't predict how long the storm would last or what chaos she'd unleash next, one thing was clear: she wasn't leaving, and I wasn't asking her to. The storm could rage for weeks, but the cabin had never felt warmer.